My name is Eric, and this nightmare started roughly 2 years ago. My wife, Lisa, and I had just made the biggest decision of our lives to leave the chaotic noise of the city behind. We bought a renovated farmhouse in a rural part of Pennsylvania. It was supposed to be our sanctuary, a place where we could finally hear ourselves, think, and eventually start a family. The house was perfect, on paper, completely isolated, surrounded by acres of dense forest, with a driveway that was a quarter-mile long. We felt like we had won the lottery. For the first week, it was absolute paradise. We spent our evenings on the porch, listening to the crickets, feeling safe in our seclusion. But that feeling of safety was shattered faster than I could have ever imagined. Our property bordered a very dense patch of ancient woods, and through the thick trees, you could just barely see the roof of the only other house for miles. We didn't see the neighbor for the first few days. We assumed they were just quiet people who valued their privacy, exactly like us. But on the fourth day, everything changed. I was unpacking boxers in the detached garage, organizing my tools, when I suddenly felt that primal sensation of eyes burning into the back of my neck. It was a physical weight. I turned around slowly and looked toward the woods. Standing at the very edge of the tree line, right where a manicured lawn met the wild brush, was a man. He wasn't doing anything suspicious at first glance. He was just standing there, perfectly still, his arms hanging limp by his sides, staring directly at me. He looked to be in his late 60s, wearing dirty, oversized work clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks. I remember waving my hand, thinking maybe he was just a curious old-timer coming to see the new owners. He didn't wave back. He didn't nod. He didn't smile. He just held that dead, blank stare for another 10 seconds, then turned robotically and walked back into the shadows of the trees. I went inside and told Lisa about it, trying to laugh it off. We told ourselves we wouldn't be those judgmental city people who were afraid of the locals. But a few days later, the situation escalated. Lisa was in the kitchen, washing dishes at the sink, which faced the backyard and the woods. She called my name, her voice trembling in a way I hadn't heard before. "Eric, come here." "He's there again." I rushed into the kitchen and looked out the window. Sure enough, the man was back, but this time he wasn't at the tree line. He was standing much closer, right next to our tool shed, only about 30 feet from the house. He wasn't looking at the shed. He was looking up at our windows, watching us. My protective instinct kicked in. I unlocked the back door and stepped out onto the porch. "Can I help you?" I yelled, trying to sound confident. He didn't flinch. He didn't look startled. He just slowly turned his head toward me with a hollow, hateful expression. His voice was gravelly and low, but it carried across the yard clearly. He said, "You shouldn't be here." That was it. Then he turned and walked away into the woods again. That night, we locked every single door and window, checking them twice. It is a terrible, sinking feeling knowing you aren't safe in your own home, the one place you're supposed to be secure. A week passed without seeing him, and we started to lower our guard. We thought maybe he was just senile or confused. Then came the night that I will never forget. It was around 2 a.m. I woke up because I heard a rhythmic, heavy thumping sound. It was vibrating through the floorboards. It was coming from downstairs. I grabbed a heavy baseball bat from the closet and whispered to Lisa to call 911 immediately. I crept down the stairs, my heart pounding so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. The thumping was getting louder. It wasn't a knock. It was the sound of someone throwing their entire body weight against the heavy oak of our back door, trying to force the deadbolt to snap. I stood at the bottom of the stairs and shouted that I had a weapon and the police were on the way. The noise stopped instantly. The silence that followed was almost worse than the noise. I crept to the door and looked through the peephole, but it was pitch black outside. I didn't dare open it. When the police finally arrived 20 minutes later, they searched the perimeter with flashlights. They found muddy boot prints all over our back porch and deep, jagged scratch marks around the lock plate, like someone had been trying to pry it open with a hunting knife or a screwdriver. The police went to the neighbor's house. We learned his name was Silas. He denied everything, of course. He claimed he had been asleep for hours. The police came back and told us that without video proof or a witness seeing him do it, they couldn't arrest him. They gave him a warning, but that was useless. We felt helpless. We installed security cameras the very next day, hoping that would be a deterrent. But Silas didn't care about cameras. 2 nights later, we were sitting in the living room trying to watch a movie when a heavy rock smashed through the front window, showering the rug and glass. I jumped up, terrified. Wrapped around the brick was a piece of crumpled paper. It had 2 words scrawled on it in shaky handwriting. Last warning. We pulled up the camera feed on my phone. We saw him. Silas was standing right in the middle of our driveway, illuminated by the floodlights. He was holding a rusted axe in his hand, just staring up at the camera lens. He wasn't hiding. He wanted us to see him. We didn't wait for the police this time. We didn't pack a bag. We just grabbed our car keys and wallets, ran to the car, and drove to a hotel 3 towns over. We never spent another night in that house. We put it back on the market the next morning. We lost a significant amount of money on the sale, but honestly, I don't care. Money can be earned back. Lives cannot. The last time I went back to the property to sign some final papers with the realtor, I looked toward the woods one last time. Silas was there, standing at the tree line, watching me leave. He was smiling. If we had stayed one more night, I am absolutely certain we would have been murdered in our beds. My name is Sarah, and this story happened last autumn. I live in a fairly upscale townhouse complex where the units are connected, and everyone generally knows everyone, or at least, we think we do. The unit attached to the left side of mine was occupied by a young, attractive couple named Greg and Amanda. To everyone on the outside, they seemed like the golden couple. They were always holding hands. They hosted neighborhood barbecues in the summer, and I'd see them jogging together every morning before work. Greg was a charismatic guy, a pharmaceutical rep who could talk to anyone, and Amanda was a sweet elementary school teacher. They were the neighbors you wanted to have. The walls in these townhouses aren't paper thin, but if it's quiet enough, you can hear muffled sounds from next door. Usually, it was just the hum of a TV or laughter when they had friends over. But in October, the atmosphere changed. I started hearing shouting late at night. It wasn't just bickering or normal relationship arguments. It was aggressive, angry yelling. And the scary part was that it was always Greg's voice. I never heard Amanda yell back. I only ever heard her crying or pleading softly. It made me incredibly uncomfortable, but I followed the unwritten rule of the suburbs. Mind your own business. I regret that decision every single day. One Tuesday night, the fighting was worse than I had ever heard it. It was around midnight. I was reading in bed when the shouting started. It escalated quickly until I heard a massive crash against our shared bedroom wall, like a heavy piece of furniture being thrown. The whole wall shook. That sound was followed immediately by a sharp, high-pitched scream that was suddenly cut short, and then dead silence. I sat up in bed, straining my ears, holding my breath to hear anything. Nothing. No crying, no yelling, no movement. Just a heavy, suffocating silence. I sat there with my phone in my hand, debating calling the cops. But I convinced myself I was overreacting. Maybe a lamp fell. Maybe she just left the room to sleep on the couch. I eventually went to sleep, uneasy. The next morning, as I walked to my car, I didn't see Amanda's vehicle. Usually, she left for school around 7:30, but her spot was empty. I saw Greg in the driveway washing his truck. He looked completely calm, whistling a tune, scrubbing the tires. Primera? Welcome over, trying to act casual, and asked, "Hey Greg, is everything okay?" I heard some loud noises last night. It sounded intense. Greg didn't even blink. He turned to me and smiled that perfect, charming smile. He said, "Oh, Sarah, I'm so sorry about that." We were moving the heavy dresser to the other wall and I slipped and dropped it. Clumsy me. Amanda got fed up with the mess and decided to go stay with her sister for a few days to cool off. It sounded plausible. Couples fight. People leave to cool off. But something in my gut felt cold. His eyes didn't match his smile. T were flat, devoid of emotion. Over the next week, Amanda didn't come back. Greg, however, was strangely busy. I heard him running the vacuum cleaner at very odd hours, 2 a.m., 4 a.m. one afternoon when I walked by his open windows. I smelled an overpowering scent of bleach and industrial cleaners, and the most disturbing part, he started watching me. Whenever I came home from work, I would see him at his living room window, just pulling the curtain back slightly, tracking my movements. 10 days after Amanda supposedly left, I came home from work early because I wasn't feeling well. Greg's truck was gone. I walked past his garage and noticed the door was slightly cracked open, maybe 6 inches. I know I shouldn't have, but my curiosity and dread were too high. I crouched down and peeked underneath the door. In the corner of the garage, piled up in clear, heavy-duty trash bags, were women's clothes. I saw a pair of heels I knew Amanda loved, and a winter coat. Why would she leave her favorite coat and purse if she just went to her sister ask for a few days? I ran back to my house, locked the door, and called the police requesting a welfare check. I told them everything: the scream, the silence, the bleach smell, the vacuuming, and the clothes. 2 officers arrived and waited for Greg to return. When he pulled into the driveway and saw the cruiser, he tried to throw the truck in reverse, but a second patrol car blocked him in. They detained him and searched the property. They found Amanda's body in the bed of his truck, wrapped in a blue tarp and hidden under camping gear. He was on his way to dump her in the wetlands that evening. It turned out he had snapped that Tuesday night and strangled her. The noise I heard against the wall was him throwing her. The thought that haunts me isn't just that he killed her, it's that, for 10 days, I was living next to a corpse. I was sleeping 5 feet away from a murderer who smiled at me and waved every morning while he was cleaning up the crime scene. He later confessed to investigators that he was planning to kill me too because he knew I was suspicious. If I hadn't called the police that afternoon, I would have been the next pile of clothes in his garage. I'm Alex, and this story is the reason I will never, ever live in a house with a crawl space or an attic again. At the time, I was a broke college student renting a tiny, run-down bungalow just off campus. It was cheap, drafty, and old, but it was all I could afford. The landlord was a slumlord who rarely fixed anything, so I got used to the weird noises of an old house pipes rattling, floorboards creaking, the wind whistling through the cracks. I learned to ignore it all. My bedroom was on the ground floor. In the back corner of the room, behind where I put my dresser, there was a small, square wooden panel in the wall. It had been painted over a dozen times with thick white paint. It was the access door to the crawl space underneath the house. Since it looked sealed shut, I pushed my heavy dresser in front of it and completely forgot it existed. About 2 months into living there, I started waking up feeling wrong. I would wake up with splitting headaches, feeling groggy and drained, like I hadn't slept at all. I was exhausted all the time. I brushed it off as stress from exams and studying too hard. Then the smells started. It was faint at first, but it grew stronger over the weeks. It was a metallic scent, mixed with something musky and sour, like old sweat and unwashed clothes. I cleaned my room top to bottom, used air fresheners, and washed all my bedding. But the smell wouldn't go away. It seemed strongest near the dresser in the corner. I just assumed it was mold in the walls because the house was so old. One night, I was studying late for a final. Around 3 a.m., the house was dead silent. I had my lamp on, highlighting my desk, while the rest of the room was in shadow. Suddenly, I heard a sound that made my blood freeze in my veins. It was a soft, wet cough, and it came from right behind the dresser. I sat in my chair, paralyzed, my pen hovering over the paper. I tried to rationalize it. I told myself it was a raccoon or a stray cat that had gotten under the house. I grabbed a flashlight and a hammer from my tool drawer, just in case. I slowly pulled the heavy dresser away from the wall to inspect the panel. My heart dropped. The thick paint around the edges of the panel was cracked and peeled. Someone or something had been opening it recently. I leaned in close and put my ear against the wood. I could hear slow, raspy breathing on the other side. I didn't open it. I knew instinctively that I shouldn't. I backed away slowly, grabbed my phone and my keys, and ran out the front door without looking back. I called 911 from the sidewalk across the street, shivering in the cold. The police arrived within minutes. I gave them the key and stayed outside while they went in with guns drawn. I heard them shouting, "Show me your hands. Come out now." followed by the sounds of a struggle and things breaking. A few minutes later, they dragged a man out in handcuffs. He was filthy, emaciated, with long matted hair and wild eyes. He looked feral. The police told me later that he had been living in the crawl space for months. He had set up a sleeping bag, had a collection of food wrappers, and bottles of water. But that wasn't the worst part. When they inspected the panel in my room, they found a small hole drilled through the wood, perfectly positioned to look into my room. And they found his phone. The phone was full of photos. Photos of me. But they weren't taken from the street. They were photos of me sleeping in my bed. They were taken from inside my room. He hadn't just been staying in the crawl space. At night, when I was in a deep sleep, he had been coming out. He had been standing over my bed, taking pictures, watching me, breathing that metallic air into my face, the drained feeling and headaches I had. The police found a rag soaked in chloroform in his bag. He had been drugging me to ensure I stayed asleep while he was in the room. I moved out that very night. I left most of my furniture behind because I couldn't bear to touch anything he might have touched. Now, I live in a 4th-floor apartment in a modern concrete building with 24-hour security. I check every closet, every cabinet, and under the bed every single night before I can close my eyes. I still have nightmares about that soft cough coming from the wall, and the realization that the monster wasn't under my bed, he was standing right beside it.